A special agent assigned to the Presidential Protection Division wakes up in a glass box, shrouded in complete darkness. The only light comes from a timer counting down the minutes. Confused and unable to remember how he got there, Jeremy starts to panic and searches for a way out. Struggling to stay calm, the Secret Service agent tries to break the box, but nothing works. Trapped in a confined space under intense psychological pressure, his years of special operations training help him stay in control. Jeremy suspects that Dietrich Morgan, a man he owes a huge gambling debt to, is behind his kidnapping. Believing it's a cruel prank by debt collectors, he pleads for his release, promising to pay. Just before the incident, he had arrived in New York to settle his score with Morgan, and he's willing to do so in exchange for his freedom. But no one responds. As the ticking timer fuels his growing dread, Jeremy realizes the countdown must signify something critical. When the timer hits 0, he hears a voice. Scanning the surroundings, he finds an old radio and reaches out. He learns that the other person is Henry Shaw, another hostage in a similar situation. Henry also has a countdown timer, and the radio is their only means of communication. Jeremy, still convinced Morgan is responsible, asks if Henry has gambling debts, but Henry insists he has never gambled. At one point, Jeremy hears noises outside and warns Henry to stay quiet. When the timer resets, the car starts moving, and Jeremy realizes he's locked in the trunk. He reconnects with Henry, trying to figure out why they were abducted. It's clear their captors want them to communicate, so Jeremy asks about Henry's background. Henry reveals he works for the State Department and has access to the White House. The conversation halts when the driver performs several dangerous maneuvers, tossing the men around. When the car stops, Jeremy urges Henry to scream to confirm their proximity, but he hears nothing. As the next countdown ends, bright lights flood their trunks, blinding them. Jeremy now sees he's inside a transparent plastic box, surrounded by wires and a tube leading into the cabin. Moments later, he receives a flashlight and a photograph. Examining it, he sees the White House with a message on the back. The kidnappers demand the location of several secret presidential bunkers used in national emergencies. Henry already knows their demands and urges Jeremy to talk, but as a sworn agent, Jeremy refuses. No threat will make him betray his duty. Henry, however, insists, pleading for him to share the information. Jeremy starts suspecting Henry is part of the kidnapping, using psychological pressure to break him. Cutting off communication, he surveys his surroundings again and spots the emergency trunk release handle. He tries breaking out but fails. When the timer resets, the car moves again. Jeremy hears a truck nearby and tunes the radio to contact its driver, Bob. He explains his dire situation, but Bob thinks it's a prank. Desperate, Jeremy convinces him otherwise and asks for help identifying the car. Bob honks his horn, and Jeremy hears it. Just then, a motorcycle passes, helping him pinpoint his location. The trucker tries getting closer, but the driver notices and evades pursuit. At the next countdown, the kidnappers turn on the lights and call Jeremy's wife, Molly. Recently separated due to his gambling, she doesn't trust him. Jeremy begs for help, but just as she agrees to call someone, she abruptly hangs up, mentioning someone in the yard. Jeremy realizes the criminals have kidnapped her too. Furious, he tries breaking the box again, but it's useless. The car moves once more, and for the first time, the kidnapper speaks to Jeremy. He offers to reveal the bunker's locations, but only if Jeremy confirms which one the president and his staff would use in an emergency. Jeremy refuses, instead trying to negotiate his release. The kidnapper rejects the offer, reminding him he's just a hostage. To prove his point, he tortures Jeremy. When the timer resets, hundreds of bees are released into the box. Jeremy panics, he's allergic. As the stings worsen, he starts suffocating and loses consciousness. Later, he wakes up, realizing the kidnappers injected him with something to keep him alive. He sees Marco, one of the criminals, listening to police radio. Noticing the vent pipe left open, Jeremy tries grabbing Marco. But Marco burns his hand with a cigarette lighter, reminding him that all this suffering will stop once he cooperates. Jeremy refuses. Marco, however, is confident he will break eventually. Contacting Henry again, Jeremy realizes Henry also knows about the bunkers. This raises his suspicions once more. Henry insists he holds a high position and communicates with White House representatives. Jeremy tests him with several questions, and Henry answers them all, proving he's legitimate. Henry is willing to reveal everything, but Jeremy orders him to stay silent. No matter what happens, protecting state secrets is more important than a few lives. Jeremy and Henry's conversation is suddenly interrupted by the wail of a police siren. The kidnappers, driving two neighboring vehicles, have exceeded the speed limit and are pulled over. Marco orders Jeremy to stay silent, warning that if he speaks, he'll receive his wife's head in a package. Realizing the kidnappers are serious and that Molly's life is in their hands, Jeremy obeys. A minute later, Jeremy hears the officer about to let the criminals go. Deciding that national security is more important than his life, or even Molly's, he starts shouting for help. His cries trigger a shootout between the criminals and the officer. Amid the gunfire, a bullet pierces the trunk, hitting Jeremy in the leg. The kidnappers manage to flee the scene. Sometime later, Jeremy regains consciousness and realizes his injury is severe. Pulling a piece of cloth from the wound, he tears his shirt to create a tourniquet and stops the bleeding. Nearby, a robber's phone rings, but the man is dead from the shootout. Thanks to the open vent, Jeremy manages to grab the phone and answers a call from one of the criminal's accomplices. Realizing Molly is still their hostage and unlikely to be spared, Jeremy decides to use the phone to report his situation. He first calls his colleague, Ben, who was recently promoted, but gets no answer. Desperate, he dials the police, providing a detailed account and asking them to track his location using cell towers. He also urges them to send a patrol to Molly's address. Hearing a dog barking, Jeremy notices a part of the box damaged by the bullet. He smashes it further and peers through the hole, spotting a dog outside. This confirms he's in a slum-like area, helping him pinpoint his possible location. The police promise to arrive soon. Just then, Jeremy sees the dog's owner and calls out, offering him a hefty reward to open the trunk. The man agrees, but before he can help, Marco's accomplices arrive. Without hesitation, they execute the unfortunate man, seal the hole in the trunk, and drive off in an unknown direction, crushing any hope Jeremy had for rescue. The timer resets. This time, Jeremy has only 30 minutes until the next painful trial. Suddenly, the local police dispatcher calls back, confirming Molly has been kidnapped. The criminals left a note on her doorstep demanding confidential information. Jeremy now faces an impossible moral and psychological dilemma, but he remains firm. He will sacrifice everything to protect national security. Henry reaches out again, telling Jeremy his timer is down to just 15 minutes, half the time Jeremy has. Fearing the worst, Henry asks Jeremy to call his family and say goodbye on his behalf. But instead of fulfilling his possible last request, Jeremy keeps trying to reach Ben. At some point, Jeremy hears a news report. There have been multiple explosions near government buildings. These aren't just kidnappers, they're terrorists. Their goal isn't ransom, it's chaos. Using cars packed with explosives, they've launched a series of attacks to force the president into hiding. Now, they need the locations of all secret bunkers to track him down and execute him. Finally, Jeremy reaches Ben and learns he's not the only hostage. The terrorists have taken 8 others, including special agents, government officials, and high-ranking CIA personnel. All of them are pawns in a deadly game, with one ultimate target, the president. Moments later, Jeremy's phone rings again. It's Molly. She reveals she's now locked in a transparent box inside a trunk, being taken to an unknown location. Panicked, she begs her husband to tell the terrorists everything. But despite the overwhelming psychological pressure, Jeremy remains silent. Jeremy understands the consequences of his choices. With tears in his eyes, he apologizes to his wife for all his mistakes, realizing he hasn't been the perfect husband. As the possibility of execution looms over them, regret fills him. Henry urges Jeremy once again to call his family, knowing his final moments are near. Jeremy dials the wife of the second hostage, but instead of her, a terrorist answers. He coldly informs Jeremy that Henry's family has already been targeted, and now all of his loved ones are in mortal danger. The weight of his silence grows heavier. Innocent people are suffering because of his refusal to talk. As Henry's countdown reaches 0, his box begins filling with liquid. With his last breaths, Henry begs Jeremy to reveal the secret bunker locations. But Jeremy can't bring himself to do it. Realizing he's about to drown, Henry starts praying before his signal fades out. Suddenly, an explosion rocks the area, and Jeremy's vehicle speeds away. He tries to contact Henry, only to realize the second hostage was used as a human bomb for another attack. The news confirms it, and Jeremy understands he's next. His own timer is running out. Ben calls, informing Jeremy that there have been 5 explosions so far. The terrorists move quickly, always one step ahead, making it impossible to track or stop them. Ben speculates that one of the hostages may have cracked under pressure and revealed the president's bunker location. If that's true, the terrorists are already on their way, and Ben is the only one who can stop them. He urges Jeremy to disclose the bunker's location, but Jeremy refuses, trusting no one, not even his own friend. Instead, he insists that all efforts be focused on rescuing Molly. With only 10 minutes left, the terrorists establish a direct connection with news anchor Jack Stern, who has been actively following the crisis. He wants to interview Jeremy, one of the hostages. Jeremy pleads for the broadcast to stop, arguing that the journalist is only fueling chaos and adding to the moral pressure. Jack ignores him and asks questions, but Jeremy evades answering. Just then, a police car rams into Jeremy's vehicle, sparking a high-speed chase. Both cars crash, but the criminals escape once again. They give Jeremy one last chance to reveal the information. When he refuses, they promise to end the conversation and slam the trunk shut. At that moment, something in Jeremy snaps. His resolve breaks. Desperate, he agrees to talk, pleading for his release. But as negotiations begin, he notices something. The terrorists aren't foreign mercenaries. They're Americans. This realization strengthens his resolve. If they're traitors, they can be exposed and caught. Regaining hope, Jeremy refuses to reveal anything, no matter what torture awaits him. Molly calls again, saying she's still trapped in the transparent box. She realizes she's in an ambulance, but has no way to escape. Meanwhile, Jeremy discovers he's being transported in a police car. The terrorists are using emergency vehicles to bypass roadblocks and checkpoints, getting dangerously close to government buildings. As time runs out, Jeremy receives another call from the terrorists. This is his final chance to reveal the bunker's location. They show him Molly's wedding ring, a clear sign that her life is in immediate danger. Molly pleads with him to just tell them what they want. Jeremy struggles but ultimately says goodbye, begging for her forgiveness. He knows they will both die soon, but he refuses to betray his oath. As the timer reaches 0, Jeremy's box begins filling, not with water, but with gasoline. A more powerful explosion is imminent, and he has only minutes left. Ben calls again, demanding the secret. But in that moment, Jeremy uncovers the truth. Ben is working for the terrorists. Ignoring his former friend, Jeremy prepares for death, trying to breathe through the small hole in the box. But it's futile, he's suffocating. At the last moment, the trunk bursts open. Someone pulls Jeremy out. Acting on instinct, he attacks his rescuer, seizing a weapon and threatening everyone around him. But then, he sees who saved him. Henry, alive and completely unarmed. Shock sets in. It was all a test. The entire situation, a training exercise. Ben, the truck driver, the dog owner, and everyone else were part of a carefully orchestrated operation. The agency wanted to see if Jeremy would reveal the president's bunker location under extreme psychological pressure. He passed the test. Molly was involved too, her role designed to push him to his absolute breaking point. Now, the ordeal is over. Jeremy can finally go to the hospital, get stitched up, and rest. As they ride together, Jeremy notices the Washington Monument through the window and smiles. Molly follows his gaze and suddenly realizes this was the location of the bunker all along. She asks him about it, but he doesn't answer. Instead, he takes out his wedding ring and, in a tender moment, asks Molly to marry him again. Relieved and overjoyed, she kisses him. But then, she reaches into his shirt, pulling out a hidden radio wire. Jeremy freezes. It was never a test. Molly and everyone else were terrorists all along. They had tricked him. After getting what they needed, she removes a gas-filled mask and places it over Jeremy's face. He fights, but it's too late. Isolated. Alone. So that's it. Hope you enjoy the story. Subscribe and press the bell icon for more videos.